Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm giving you today my review of Elden Ring. I just want to give you a couple of disclaimers before we get started. I will not be showing any of the story boss fights. I will, however, be showing you some of the minor and dungeon bosses. So if you don't want any of the world spoiled for you, please listen, don't watch, and I'll paint a picture in your imagination of the lands between. My final disclaimer is I have over 170 hours into the game, but I have not completed the main story yet, and whilst I do consider this to be a review, I guess technically it's still in progress. Now with those out of the way, let's get into it. Now, I definitely need to be honest with you guys from the get-go. I am not a Souls gamer. In fact, my first brutal introduction to the From Software specific flavour of gaming was Sekiro. Not a great introduction to the genre for me. I believe the first boss is where I slapped that eject button and uninstalled the game. That 3 hours was some of the longest hours I've ever endured playing a video game in my life. Battling it out with the same boss for hours and hours on end is just not my bag, baby. I was pretty sure that that was it for me. I would never be playing another Souls game in my life. But let's fast forward to 2022 and 170 hours later, and I am completely enamored with Elden Ring. I don't think it's going too far to call this game a masterpiece. That phrase in gaming is too often associated with perfection, so please, let me be direct. This game is not perfect. It has some magnificent design choices, but it also has some very strange ones. We'll get into what I think needs improving throughout the review, but what you should know is I'm a former Souls-like detractor, and I am loving this game. What makes this game so special isn't just one thing, but a plethora of design choices that weave together in an intricate tapestry of mechanically sound combat, genuinely creative boss encounters, spine-chilling enemy design, and one of the largest explorable maps I've seen in an open world setting with an obscene amount of biodiversity to match, most of it reachable as soon as you enter the starting area. It's an exploration that Elden Ring really shines its brightest though. The game takes an approach that's rarely, if ever, seen. Most modernistic open-world offerings are curated in such a way as to be constantly directing you to the next quest, item, secret, or story beat. I'm looking at you, Ubisoft. This is usually done with map markers linked to a quest log, and even the topography of the biomes direct you to where the developers want you to go. Elden Ring does none of this. It instead draws from gaming's past, when the scenery itself piqued your interest and you wondered, what's over there? That ominous looking tower in the distance, a great island castle protruding from the sea, or a cave entrance cut into an imposing cliff face. I think it's for this reason that I've pumped so many hours into Elden Ring and haven't suffered any open world fatigue that I so often get from other open world games with extended playthroughs. I'm looking at you, Horizon Zero Dawn. Almost every single time I strayed from the storyline to explore the world, I was rewarded with an item like crafting materials, health or mana flask upgrades, weapons, armor, or often even a new enemy archetype that usually killed me, but created a challenge for me to go back and defeat. It's a very special game that can continually take me from the path to explore the world so consistently. The enemy variants that populate the lands between are incredibly diverse, from bosses to minor bosses to the regular NPCs, if you can even call them regular. Even when you face a variant of an enemy you've battled earlier in the campaign, they never feel stale or phoned in. They usually come with a different moveset and they'll lull you into the false sense of security with the old ones, and when you least expect it, they'll leave you wondering where the hell that came from, but more determined to crush them the next time. Nothing about this game is easy, but everything about it is worth it. After 170 hours into this game, I am still finding new enemies, new biomes, and that's an incredible accomplishment from a studio of any size, let alone a mid-sized studio like From Software. The landscape itself doesn't want to make it easy for you, and it feels like an active character within the game, a hostile one at that. More than a few of my deaths have been caused by the map itself. It's a believable vista, and it's what you'd expect from a land torn apart violently. This is a beautiful, deadly, and diverse world. From Software has nailed the lands between. Within this prestigious world, you'll find innumerable dungeons with optional bosses and usually a specific NPC type. And as you progress into the later areas, the enemies within those dungeons will scale in difficulty, as do their bosses. Many of these bosses are repeats of previous enemies you've fought and battled within past dungeons. This is definitely not a bad thing, as each time you face a similar boss, they've got a new bag of tricks and attacks for you to overcome, keeping them fresh and challenging. The dungeons themselves are full of puzzles, platforming, and traps for you to navigate. This gameplay loop, coupled with the chance of high rewards after defeating the bosses, makes every dungeon a must explore. Progression in Elden Ring is straightforward in many ways, but can also be complicated. The evolution of your character is funded by a single in-game currency, runes. Runes are collected in a few ways, but mainly from killing enemies, and in most cases, the amount directly relates to the difficulty of each enemy. The currency system is a familiar trope to most Souls players. Something else that's quite familiar to Souls players is the level up system itself. Leveling up can be achieved at campfires called Sites of Grace, and as you add points to your individual attributes, the cost increases. The attributes that are available are Vigor, which is your health, Mind, this is your FP, which is basically what magicians use to cast spells. Endurance, this relates to how much weight can be carried, so it's your armor, weapons, flasks. Every single piece of equipment you carry has a weight value. Strength, and whilst endurance allows you to carry larger weapons, this allows the wielding of these weapons. Dexterity, and that affects the casting speed and the use of some weapons within the game. Then there's Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane. These are all very build specific. Intelligence relates to the sorcerers and what they can cast and how powerful their casting is. Faith, the same for cleric builds, and Arcane can be used across all of the builds to wield different weapons and also to wield some different spells. All sounds fairly straightforward there, but it becomes a little bit more complicated when you begin adding weapons, staffs, armor, seals, potions, and then obviously all the items that you can pick up from the vendors. As with the rest of the game, there's no hand-holding here, and the progression can become overwhelming, and here is where I believe FromSoft could have provided a much more intuitive UI. For instance, there's no way to compare the weapon you're holding to a weapon that you would like to buy, and or a weapon that you have picked up and is already in your inventory. This really is a minor gripe overall, but I do believe that From Software needs to work on this in their future titles. There is a few other design choices that have been made with this game that cause it to be more tedious than it needs to be. One of those is the lack of a quest log. There's no quest log to let you know who you've spoken to and what they've said. Again, it's a minor gripe with the game, and it's one that can be solved by going to the wiki and just looking up what you've done and who you've spoken to and where you might need to go next. However, anything that takes you out of the immersion of the game, in my opinion, is always a bad thing and should be rectified. Another of those strange design choices is the multiplayer in Elden Ring. It does offer co-op of up to 3 players, but the system itself is messy and confusing, and once again, Elden Ring does nothing to offer much of an explanation as to how that system works. 2-player co-op can be initiated at any point in the game with a special item, but you're limited to sectioned areas, so moving through the world together is extremely limited. Now, 3-player co-op can only be initiated at small statues throughout the world called summoning pools. They are littered throughout the world and are plentiful, so you won't run out of places to be able to go 3-player co-op. However, that isn't the issue. It's the limiting nature of blocking off the areas and the rigmarole of bringing people into your game in 2 different ways. If From Software's objective was to make co-op so annoyingly difficult that you give up trying, mission accomplished. In short, this really needs some attention ASAP. The last core pillar that makes this game so amazing is its well fleshed out combat systems. If you've ever played any Souls-like game, you'll be familiar with the punishing combat system in Elden Ring. Whilst the combat is basic in its moveset with jump, dodge, roll, block and attack, heavy attack, it does require skill and patience to beat even the easiest of foes. Stealth is a mechanic that's also been added to the game, and honestly this feels very much like an unnecessary addition. Whilst it can be useful, very often it's simply not. The hitbox is tough to nail 100% of the time, and you have to be sniffing their butt cheeks to trigger a backstab. An early game, until you get used to it, it's very likely you will get killed trying to stealth kill an enemy more than a few times. Another all too familiar feature is the auto lock-on system. It's back from previous Souls games and it is not much improved. It's janky, often it'll drop out around slight bends, spinning you around 180 degrees and opening your back for an attack. It will randomly switch between enemies mid-combat, again causing you to open yourself to an attack. And in a game that's combat is heavily skill-focused and based in timing, distance and positioning, this is definitely an area that needs improvement. With these not-so-minor gripes out of the way, the combat is nonetheless, for the most part, satisfying and rewarding. Certainly the best in class we've come to expect from Software. Whilst it does have a few bugs that I've outlined in the combat, it is still one of the best systems in any Souls-like to be found today. There is currently no competition for Elden Ring in the gaming market right now. Its world-building combat and pure scope continues to surprise and delight me 170 hours after I've started playing the game. Whilst its story, its multiplayer and some minor combat issues do hold Elden Ring back from being a perfect outing, it's the closest game seen on any system in gaming that almost breaches that line of perfection. I highly recommend, if you have not yet picked up a copy of Elden Ring, head out now and buy this game. You will not regret your time in the lands between. Thank you for taking the time to watch my Elden Ring review today. If you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button and that bell so you can be notified whenever I drop new content. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out the door, and I will see you all in the next one.
We're on a mission from God.